I'm here with Janice Pauly, a veteran tournament director in the pickleball world. Welcome, Janice.
Hello.
Hello. Um, Janice, how many pickleball tournaments do you think you've run?
I can't even imagine counting.
How
I've been
many a
doing it
year?
for, I've been doing it for, let's see, 14 years. And
Wow.
that's when I first started. It was one or two a year. And then it lately it's been 10 to 12 a year. It's not a profession for me. It is something that I do because I enjoy doing it and it's a challenge. Um, and so, yeah, so I'd have to go back and look and count them all up for you.
So tell me, what were you doing before pickleball came along?
Right before pickleball, I was a middle school phys ed teacher. And when I retired from teaching, and I had taught pickleball as part of my middle school curriculum. And the reason I taught it because it was a great sport for kids of all skill levels. And this is what it still is. You can get out there, you can succeed to a certain extent right from the beginning. Get the ball to go back and forth over the net right from the beginning. And so I had done that with my classes in middle school. And then when I retired, I got back in touch with a friend of mine who I used to play a lot of tennis with, and she was playing pickleball. So that was how I started actually playing pickleball more with her. And then from there, I started running tournaments. So
But
that's
before you were a PE teacher, you also have a bit of a computer background?
Yes, before I taught phys ed, I was a recreation director, and I also programmed computers for a number of years, and I was an exercise physiologist at Xerox for a few years. So yeah, so I did a lot of different things.
Yes. And it seems like the perfect background to be a tournament director, relying on software as well.
Yeah, yeah. There were two things. One was the actual software part of it, being able to understand the concept behind how things work. And when I first started out using the software, using basically the pickleball tournament software, which was pickleball brackets back then, um, there it was in its infancy, and having someone like me using it who understood that things aren't always going to go right. You need to be able to quickly adapt. That I think that was a benefit.
Yeah. And tell me a bit about your relationship there with pickleball brackets, now pickleball tournaments.
So I started off. I was the first person to run a tournament on pickleball brackets that was not um, a tournament by by the developer of the software, who was Jason Santier. So he had run two tournaments of his own, and then he needed basically a guinea pig to to start, sort of test it out. And it turned out I was probably the perfect person for that because of my background with computers. And so I started off doing that, and ran tournaments for him, then started doing training of other people to run tournaments. And I still see him. I still talk to him. I actually am a consultant now for pickleball tournaments and doing a lot of other different things for them. I don't do much training for them anymore, but I still consult for their software support people. So when the software support people someone who can answer a question about how things work, rather than go to Jason, which he's busy with lots of other things right now, they'll come to me first. So,
All right. And what has been your favorite event to run?
you mean favorite tournament?
I mean, a pickleball event, whether it was at a tournament or anything else.
Um, I like the Empire State Senior Games. Um, I may be a little biased because it was the first one I actually played in, but it's a more of a community of people than some of the other tournaments that I do, because it was in existence before that. You know, they've been around for a long time, 20 something, more than 20 years.
And that's the New York Senior Games, right?
Yes, yes. And so that was a small community of players when I got involved, and it's grown to be a bigger community of players now. But uh, but that particular tournament is really important for the players who play in it. The New York State seniors. They come from all over the state for that, and for some of them, it's the only tournament they play in all year long.
Hmm.
So it's always been sort of, my favorite event to see old friends, to see people. Yeah. So I like that.
Nice. What is your biggest pain as an organizer?
The biggest pain, I don't know. I get, I sometimes I feel like the questions that people ask, they can find right on the website, because there's so much detail there and people don't read it.
Yeah.
Their first, thought is, well, I'm going to get in touch with the tournament director. I'm going to email the tournament director to answer this question, which was right on the webpage of the tournament. So,
Yep.
so that's irritating. I wish that didn't happen as much as it does, but that's the way that's people. It's,
Yes, for sure. What would you say your biggest strength is as a tournament director?
I am completely organized.
I've
That's
seen that.
yeah, it's the all of the attention to detail, the organization skills, which I developed long before I ever started doing pickleball. Organizational skills to run a tournament are extremely important, and I I think that there are some people who think that, well, I played at a tournament, I should be able to run one. And that's not always true. You really have to be very organized. You have to be right on top of things. You have to communicate with the players immediately. Answer their emails when they send you an email. Don't let it sit for a week.
Mhm.
Give them your best answer. Help them as much as possible, because as much as you can help them during registration, that will save you time during the actual tournament, because it eliminates problems then.
Yep.
So yeah, it's organization skills.
I've seen that in action.
Yeah.
What is your favorite format in terms of your tournaments that you run in the how you set up the divisions?
Oh, round robin. Yeah. I don't do double elimination tournaments. I only run round robin tournaments, and the reason for that. There's a couple of reasons for that, but the main reason is when I first started out running tournaments, everybody did double elimination. And it became pretty clear to me very soon that I didn't think it was fair. Everybody paid the same amount
Yep.
to play in these tournaments. And if you weren't really good, you would be gone in two rounds. And I personally didn't think that was fair. I think everybody should have the opportunity to play as many games as possible. And so that's when I started moving to round robin. Now, round robin sometimes has its own issues with making sure that the brackets are the right size. You have to make sure they're the right size and they fit into your schedule. But everybody gets the same number of games. And you can either do it straight round robin, or you can have a playoff. And people will say, well, that's not a real tournament format. Tournaments are double elimination. But to me, it is, because you play everybody in that bracket. You
Yeah.
don't just, you if you can't beat everybody else, then you shouldn't be considered the winner. So that's sort of why round robin. And the other part with round robin, it's much easier to schedule and get people in and out without having to sit around and wait all day long.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
so
very
that's why I
efficient.
do it. Yes,
Okay.
very efficient. People like
It-
that.
they do. They do. Is there anything new out there that you want to try?
um, n- so there will be coming up at some point soon an ability for players to put in their own scores at a tournament
Mm,
rather than having the score sheets. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I definitely would want to try to do that. I know there's some other software platforms that allow that,
yeah.
but they're not as comprehensive as pickleball tournaments. So I would not be switching to that just for that benefit. But
Okay.
I do want to see how that runs and if it helps move things along and if it helps the players. It's really all about the players. Keep the
Yes.
players happy. So,
Well, thank you.
mhm.
And if it's accurate, like most of
And
the
if it's
scoring
accurate,
mistakes come from players.
right, that's right. And so you have to have checks in place for that. Like I said, I don't know when that's going to happen,
Yeah.
but when it does, if it's helpful, if it makes it easier for players, if it makes their experience more enjoyable, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your organization systems.
What do you mean by?
I guess it starts with how you organize your registration and your signups. That's where it
Mhm.
starts.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I always use one of the features that I found was, and this is the best feature in the world, is the waiting list system. So I always use that,
Hmm.
and what that does is and this is really related to doubles and mixed doubles, is it requires someone who registers for one of those events, doubles or mixed doubles, to have their partner sign up within so many days. And you can set the number of days. And generally, it depends on how popular you think this tournament is going to be. But what that does is it forces the player to get a partner and that will is the only thing that will guarantee them a spot in the event, because if the partner doesn't register, the player gets moved to the waiting list. And if the bracket fills up before they get a partner, they're out of luck. And I don't have to do anything for that to happen. The computer
Hmm.
takes care of it all. So that has made organizing and setting up and getting everything ready to run a lot easier. It happens automatically. And as long as you warn people in advance that this is what's going to happen, it works great. And there are so many times when I've seen where a player gets moved to the waiting list because they don't have a partner. They get a notice, I get a notice, and 5 minutes later their partner registers without me having to do anything. So I mean, that
Nice.
was a godsend, to be honest, in
Yeah.
in getting registrations resolved. Because if you don't use that, you can end up at when your registration closes with 10 teams where it's just one person and the partner isn't registered.
Yeah.
And then you have to chase them down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it messes up your brackets.
Yeah, because you can't predict how big the bracket's
Yeah.
going to be. And you only have if your registration closes 2 weeks before the tournament, then you spend 2 weeks chasing people down.
Hmm.
And you can't
Hmm.
get a schedule done because you don't really know how many full teams you have, all of those things.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that's,
And how do you like to break up your events, your divisions?
In terms of skill or age?
Both.
Uh, okay. So again, it depends on the size of the tournament. I have one tournament I'm running right now. It's not a very big tournament. It's a 1-day tournament, and we basically just have 2 skill groups. They call it an intermediate and advanced because
Okay.
nobody's a beginner. So, uh, so intermediate is 3-5 and under, and advanced is 4-0 and above.
Okay.
So for a small tournament, that's probably enough. You don't need to have more than that. For the bigger tournaments, you probably want to do it by exact skill. 3-0 and under, 3-5, 4-0, 4-5 and above, or whatever. Again, depending on the size of the tournament. In terms of age, it depends on the tournament. For the senior games, when I do senior games, because senior games have very specific 5-year age groups,
Yes.
I set them up so that you register for your 5-year age group. And that's it. You're not going to register that's how they register. And then if we don't have enough in a particular 5-year age group, then we merge them together. And then for a playing bracket. For other tournaments that are not senior games, where there are not specific age groups, it's not sanctioned, so I don't have to go by certain age groups. I will often just have them register by skill level, with the caveat that if the bracket gets big, we're going to split them by age. And the age groups can be flexible. If the age group is flexible, you set your age group so you end up with reasonable size brackets. The goal being like 6 or 7 teams in a bracket for a round robin event,
Mhm.
or more. I can do up to 8 or 9, but I'd rather do that than have them split and play in pools and then have a playoff. I'd rather split them by age and do that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Why?
Well, because sometimes what happens if you register them just by skill, right? And then you say, okay, we're just gonna we're gonna separate them into 2 pools where they play each other at the end. Then you have to think about adjusting the pools, who's in the pools. You have to spend time figuring, okay, am I gonna do this I'm gonna move people around because of their age? Am I going to leave it the way the computer does it, which is basically by skill level? The computer seeds them according to their skill level. And then you're subject to complaints from the players at the end who, say if this age range goes from, 10 to 50, then they say, well, there were too many 20-year-olds in my bracket. That wasn't fair. So I'd rather just in my pool, so I'd rather just split them up right off at the beginning,
Yeah.
and do it that way. Then there are other tournaments that do actually split them by age to start. So they'll have a 10 to 30, or some of them 10 to 34, 35 to 49, and then 10-year groups beyond that. And what happens then is that sometimes you end up combining age groups, and they're not happy with that either. So if you have to combine your 10 to 34 with your 35 to 49 or your 35 to 40 group, then the 35 to 40 group may say, well, you should have combined me with the older group. You shouldn't have combined me with the younger group,
Got it. Got it.
So
What is your
they end up not playing with the people they thought they were going to play with when they signed up.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just say, okay, I'm going to make this split, I'm just going to split it. And then they know that, and they look at the list and say, okay, there's a bunch of 20-year-olds in there. I'm 50. I know I'm not going to play with them. It's either way, there are people that are not going to be happy, but
Yeah.
I just think it works better for me that
Okay.
way. So,
What is your perfect size of a division?
if you're going to do a round robin, the
Yeah.
easiest size to manage that I found is 7 teams. Some people say they don't want to buy. I like the buy because if you have a buy, it keeps things moving, especially when what I do is I group them by courts. So everybody's, you have 3 courts, you have groups going on at the same, everybody's playing sort of at the same time. You can manipulate it so that you basically have games going on constantly
Mm,
with an odd number of teams. 6 is okay. 6 works.
yeah.
And 8 is a little more difficult, but you can still make it work. And I actually do up to 9 in a single bracket. Once I get to 10, then I split them up.
Okay.
And what I do, if I actually split them completely by age, then I do a double round robin for teams, for groups of 5. Because again, you want to give people as many games as possible. And so you can shorten the games and give them a double round robin, and they're usually pretty happy with that, rather than having 2
Yeah.
pools of 5 and then a playoff where, 4 of the teams are not going to, 6 of the teams are not going to make the playoff.
So in 2 pools of 5, you have no playoff?
I would split them by age and do a double round robin with no
Okay.
playoff. Yeah,
Okay.
I do
All right.
that often. I think, sometimes you can't actually split them by age because if you have like a bunch of people in the middle of the group who are all the same age, then you have a problem. So you can't always do it that way. But
Yeah.
if I can, that's what I do. Yeah.
Okay. And you recommended to me when I was starting out to do designated courts where you'd have the division on the same courts the whole time, and you had some good reasons for that, like a philosophy, and felt like there's more camaraderie. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there's 2 reasons. One is efficiency because they're not going anywhere. They're all on those
Right.
courts. They know they're going to be playing on those courts. And they know the games are going to be run consecutively. So yeah, if they get to go to the bathroom or something like that, then they can leave and come back. But they know where they need to be. Um, so that's that, and that definitely helps because if you're using the other system, which is next available, and you've got 20 courts, they play one game here, then their next game is way over there. They have to spend time picking up their stuff, going over there, waiting for the other team to get there, waiting for their friends to get there. It's just a waste of time. So
Yeah.
that's one. The other part is the camaraderie. Um, when you're sitting there in this one area with all of the other people that you're playing against, and you're there for 2.5 hours or so with them, you get to be friends and you talk to each other, and it makes, I think, things much more social and civilized. If you have a disagreement, it's a disagreement with someone who you've just been sitting with and talking to. And if you have a disagreement on the court, I think you're more likely to be a little more respectful of them, to be honest, in your discussions about that disagreement. And I
Yeah.
found that I very rarely have significant disagreements, rather than the other system, which is okay, you play against this team and then you're not going to see them again. Even if it's round robin, you're not going to see them again. You go one way, they go the other way. Then you see somebody else who you haven't seen before. So they're strangers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another benefit, and we kind of alluded to, is that everyone's sitting near the courts, and if someone went to the bathroom or someone's missing, people know, oh, Joe, he was sitting there. He must have just gone to the bathroom. It just makes it easier to find your people who are out on the court next.
Right. And it's you don't have to worry about a 10-minute time limit for people to
Yeah.
show up because everybody pretty much knows
Right
where
there.
people are. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now tell me about some of your systems on tournament day. Kind
On
of ho
tournament day, yeah. So
yeah.
what I do on the day of the tournament, obviously I have everything already set up. I will, and I use the check-in so that I can see who has checked in. And for the most part, if I am running round robin events on designated courts, I have the score sheets already printed out in advance. And so I will start the day by with the check-in. Check-in people tell the players what courts they're playing on. So those are the courts they have to go to warm up. Uh, that saves a lot of time, again, rounding people up before the
Mhm.
event starts. So when you announce the start of an event, they're already at the courts. Um, and then you can go out and I will take the score sheets. I check the check-in first to see if everybody's there. And sometimes if they're all there early, I go out and start the event early. Um, Sometimes you have one person missing, but their partner's there. So then we go out and we get things started and we make sure that the partner is in the bathroom or wherever. Maybe they just forgot to check in. But you always do attendance right on the court before you start the event. You want to be
Even
sure
though
that
even though you already did the automated check-in?
correct, even though the automated check-in, because you never know. And this happens sometimes when you have, say, a 2-day tournament and the people doing your check-in are not the most experienced, right? And this is often volunteer, whatever. And
Yeah.
say somebody comes on Saturday and they're also playing on Sunday, and the person at check-in checks them in for both events.
Mm.
And so then on Sunday, you're doing this event and looks like they're checked in when they're really still not here yet. So I always do attendance before you start the event. You want to be sure everyone is there. And, then I just explain how everything's going to work, how the score sheet's going to work. It's different depending on the size of the bracket, what the scoring is. Again, maybe different depending on the size of the bracket. If there's a court monitor, I introduce the court monitor, make sure the court monitor, they know who the court monitor is, who's going to bring the score sheets up to us. Or in some cases, the players have to bring the score sheets, just to
Yeah.
make sure that everybody understands how things go and then get started. And really, the hardest part with a big tournament is getting it started in the morning,
Mhm.
just getting everything going. After that, it runs pretty much on its own till the end.
Explain your organization of the score sheets on some of your events where you're stapled them together.
Yes. So some of the events that I do, usually if it's up to 6 or 7 teams, so I run them by round. So say you have 6 teams and you have 3 courts. And so the games are played, it's round robin, the games are played by round. And I will staple the rounds together. So round 1 has 3 games going on. And they play all 3 games at the same time. And then when all 3 are done, they fill in the score sheets. We take them back, or the runner takes them back, or the court monitor takes them back. And then they start the next round. And everybody starts the next round at the same time. And once all games are finished, then they play the next round. Now, I'm going to tell you what everybody tells me, that that's a waste of time, that we're wasting time doing that. Because if one group takes a little longer to finish, then people are sitting around for a few more minutes waiting for that group to finish, waiting for that match to finish before they can start the next round. But during that time period, players can go to the bathroom, they can fill their water bottle, they can relax for a few minutes before they have to play their next game. It's never a huge amount of time. I mean, it's possible it could be, and then we sort of try to deal with those issues separately. But, it's never more than no more than 10 minutes at the most.
Yeah.
And that's unusual for it to be that long. It's usually more than 5. It's usually around 5 minutes. And so it gives everybody a break. And then they play their next round. If it's an odd number of teams, there's always one team that's sitting out. So they get a little bit longer break. They get a bye, but they only get one bye in the entire round.
Yep.
And they know when it's going to happen.
So you've been running it that way for so long, and your players are so used to it. I've seen them run it themselves. Like, you have them so well trained that they can run those rounds themselves. And when they're done with the packet, the stapled packet, they just put it on their score clipboard sideways. So your people picking up the scores just pick it up and bring it back to the score table. It's pretty impressive. I tried doing it at one of mine, and my people aren't trained quite as well. I needed a volunteer running it.
Yeah, it always does help to have a volunteer, to have someone there. The court monitors. Some of the tournaments I run, we have a lot of volunteers, so we can do that. And I have to say that in general, the women are better at doing this than the men are. So with a group of women, I can often put one of the women who's playing sort of in charge and say, okay, just make sure everything runs smoothly. And whereas with the men, I often have to have one of the spouses who's sitting by spectating run the event. I think it's just the difference between the way men and women think, to be honest. But you can always find someone who can sort of keep things on track. And the emphasis is on play it by round. Don't start pulling these sheets apart. That causes problems. So
Yeah. And you also color code your scorecards. So each division running has its own color.
yes, and
That's pretty neat. And that's helpful for the volunteers. I think that
yeah, it's helpful for the volunteers, and it's also very helpful if there's a challenge to the score later. Somebody comes back and says, oh, you put my score in incorrectly. It makes it a lot easier to find the original score sheet. You just ask them, what color score sheets? And then you can go back and find it. So, yeah. Yep.
all right. Any other advice for people just starting to run events and run tournaments?
I think the start small. Don't try to do anything more than six courts or so the first time around. 6, maybe 8 courts. Don't come right off the bat and try to do a 500 player tournament if you've never done one before. There are a lot of people who think they can manage that, and that's when you run into problems. And you have to be flexible too, especially if you're running an outdoor tournament, because you have to be able to handle weather. You have to be able to make changes at the last minute. People get hurt. You have to be able to swap in players if you need to, or rearrange your bracket if you need to. So you got to be really flexible.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Janice. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome.